All right, today we are going to get started on chapter 7. Now I'm starting with a blank Maya scene here because it's really important that you understand the referencing that she talks about at the very beginning of the chapter. Referencing is an excellent way to really speed up our production pipeline so that it's not just the modeler does all of their job, followed by the rigger does all of their job, followed by the animator does all of their job, right? It allows you to break up that what we call a waterfall pipeline. It allows each person to actually be working on this file at the same time because they're each using a different version that's referencing in the other artist's files. So I'm going to start with that. So I have a blank file, and the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a project. We're going to be working on Marv for the rest of this class, so we definitely want to set up a project folder structure because we're going to have multiple files that are all speaking to each other, right? We're going to have a rig file that's being referenced, or sorry, that is referencing the geometry file. That rig file ultimately would be referenced into animation files, right? And so we need to have all of these files accessible and all stored into one structure. That way everything is together. So I'm going to create a new project and I'm going to call it Marv. And let me change my location to my drive here. Cool. And accept. Awesome. Now I'm going to navigate to that location, which is my project file is Marv, right? And in here, I'm going to place my rig file into, or sorry, my geometry file into this structure. So I'm going to go to my textbook project files. I'm going to grab that MarvBird GeoV1. I'll just copy that, and I'm going to put it into my assets folder here. I'll paste that in there, right? So this is not a scene that I will be touching. I'm not the modeler in this case. This is just an asset that the modeler has given to me, and that's what I'm going to be referencing into my rig file. That's why I want to keep it into my assets, not in my scenes, because that's actually where I will be working. All right? Awesome. So now I'm going to go back to Maya, and I'm going to go File, Create Reference, or Command R, and I'm going to grab that MarvBird GeoV1. Cool. So this reference is in Marv, and she'll go in depth about sort of all of the things that are happening here. When we're doing the reference, you'll notice that we have these little blue diamonds next to the icons here, which shows that that is a referenced asset. Also, if I go into the reference editor now, we can see that Marv has been referenced. And I'm going to change the namespace just like she does to bird. And she discusses why that's important. All right, so now we're going to start creating the skeleton for our character. I'm going to turn on the X-ray joints button here. I'm also going to do it in each of my other panels just so I can see them as I'm working. I'm also going to show my wireframe, maybe not in that one. But definitely in these. We'll notice actually now that I'm looking at Marv is facing sideways. He's facing to the X direction, which is why our front camera is his side and the side camera is his front. Not a big deal. I'm just going to leave it that way. Blame your modeler. All right, so I'm going to start creating joints. With her, she starts in the center where we should always start with our root joint. So in this case, I am going to show my geometry, and I'm going to be working in here, and so that's why I'm going to choose this front camera side view of Marv, so I can start working in sort of his center mass there. All right, let me change my menus to rigging, create joints, and we can start going. All right, so I'm just going to create 3 different joints that are not going to be connected, so just click Enter. And then if you hit Y, you can reuse that same tool. So click Enter, Y, click Enter. All right, so I just created 3 joints here. I'm going to name them. This one will be my root underscore joint, JNT, and that's how all of our joints are going to be named. This one is upper. I'm going to follow her naming conventions here. Upper body joint. Lower body joint. Cool. And I've arranged them like this. The exact location of the root doesn't exactly matter, but I definitely want sort of the upper body feeling like it's above the lower body. Otherwise, that'd be a little bit awkward. But something like this works really well. So in a person, we'd place them around the belly button. Marv's obviously have a different shape, but this works pretty well. All right. So I'm going to take my upper body and my lower body and make them children of the root, right? So just select all the children and then the parent and hit P, right? Remember, we're just doing parenting here, right? Edit parent, because these are all joints. We don't have to do any constraining between different joints, right? All right, cool. So now we're going to start working on the leg. In this case, I think she does the right side of the bird when she's drawing her leg. I might even do the left because I'm looking at the left. Or what we could do is actually just create different cameras. So like my back camera would be the one which shows his right leg. It doesn't actually matter which one you choose. As long as you flip it over to the other side, it'll be the same anyways. So I'm just going to be working on Marv's left side because that's the one that's most visible to me. All right, so first thing I'm going to do is create the hip. So the hip will be somewhere in here. There. Next is the knee. Somewhere right around there. Followed by the ankle, which I might put. Again, as I'm looking at these, I'm looking at the geometry, so I'm thinking like maybe across that one, maybe across that one. I'm going to do here. All right, and then the way the toes are set up, we're going to have the ball of the toe somewhere here, and I'm looking at the middle toe is sort of where I'm thinking, not the closest one to me. So the ball of the toe will be somewhere around here, and I'm kind of guessing at this point that, I don't know. Again, this is a guess, and I'm going to move these anyway. So something like that, right? So the ball of the toe, the end of the toe, and then the tip of the toe. And she's got a great illustration or image on 117 showing the difference between the bird's toes and a person toe. But in many ways they're quite similar. All right. So now I need to get this into their proper places. I might even look here. Right, so that hip, I'll just scoot it over. From here, I could move these. Remember, anytime we move joints, anytime we translate the joints, we are modifying the orientation of those joints. So if you choose to move it with the translation, you will definitely have to reorient your joints. A different approach could be you could try to rotate the joint into place. It's a little bit more complicated, but then you could freeze your transformations, and then the orientations still work together, and it's clean. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to move it because it's a little bit easier. Just know that when you move your joint, you're going to have to reorient it afterwards. Cool. All right, so that one is good. Looks good. And I'm going to even go to my top view here. One thing that might make this easier, actually, is if I grab this top camera, wherever it is, there it is, way up there. I'm just going to pull it straight down. Ooh, too far. And you'll notice as I move it into the body, I can't see it, but it'll basically cut off that top of the body, which could make this looking at the leg much simpler. So maybe right there. And all of a sudden, I can actually see like all of my leg joints, which is awesome. So I'll just scoot this one over here. I'll move this one farther down, right in that section, and I don't know, the tip's pretty good. All right. Cool. Just double checking each of my placements that they look right, and that feels pretty good. All right, now I'm going to create the other toes. What I'm going to do actually is just basically copy this joint. Oops, not copy, I hate that. Sheesh. What I'm going to do is just select this joint and duplicate it. What's nice about that is it's automatically parented, and I have the other two joints here, so I'm just going to scoot it over, maybe check my top view again. Somewhere around there. And then I'm going to rotate this into place. Somewhere around there, and then just sort of move them farther or closer. Check all of your angles while you're doing this. It might not be the appropriate height. This one looks a little bit too high. There, that looks like it's good. Cool, and then I'll do the same thing on the other side. Know that when I rotated that, I have that rotational value in here, so I definitely need to freeze my transformations before I start doing any sort of connecting up of these joints, so just pay attention to that. Alright, that looks good. I'll scoot this one back. You'll notice that I'm working sort of down the chain, right? I'd never moved this one before I moved that one. Because the child will always move with the parent, so I'm always working sort of from the top of the chain in and then downwards. This one, I'll scoot you over there. And again, I might scoot this just a little bit lower. Maybe not. Cool. I'll leave that there. And that looks pretty good. Let me go ahead. I'm going to grab my whole chain here and freeze transformations while I'm thinking about it. Right, so that'll get rid of those rotational values. And now I'm definitely going to rename everything. All right. So this will be my hip, or let's see, I'm going to name it the way. So L, hip, joint, right? So left, of course, and then hip joint. This one will be L, knee joint, L, ankle joint, and then again following her her naming conventions here. So I'll start here. So L, inside ball joint, and I'm just going to copy this to make my life easier. Paste it. So L, inside toe joint, and L, inside tip joint, and then the same thing for the other ones. So this one is L, middle ball joint, L, middle toe joint, and L, middle tip joint, and then the last one, so L, outside toe and tip. Make sure you're renaming as you go. Renaming is going to be really, really important to maintain our sanity as well as maintain organization. If you're not renaming, everything can get very confusing very quickly, especially as we start skinning and painting weights and trying to figure out what's happening. All right, now that we have done that, we need to fix our orientations because we moved them. All right, so I'm going to display the orientations here. And actually, before I do that, I'm just going to, I'll grab the hip and then I'll orient. So skeleton, orient, joint, and then I'll display those orientations. All right, so remember we want all of them to go the same direction. Doesn't matter which direction they're going. As long as the X's are pointing down the chain, which is what that orient joint will do automatically for us, we want all the Z's and the Y's to point the same way. So it looks like most of my Z's are pointing to the left and the Y's are pointing up. So that's what I'm going to do to fix the other ones. You'll notice my knee is at like a wonky angle. So that's definitely something that I'm going to want to fix. And remember, we're only rotating around the x-axis in order to get this orientation difference, right? Because that's going to rotate the y and the z, and the x will stay pointing down the chain to the other one. So to get the z pointing directly to the left, I'm actually going to use my top view and just sort of watch that z direction. You can sort of go closer and closer until that z looks pretty straight like that, right? That way my knee is going to bend forward and backwards and not at sort of a wonky direction. I'm also going to grab that hip joint and do the same thing. Go to my top view and rotate around the x direction until that z is pointing downwards or my y is pointing forwards, however you want to think about that. Cool. And that should get me what I'm looking for. Let me just double check. You'll notice in these cases the z is not going to be pointing straight downwards here, right? We want it to be pointing sort of perpendicular. It'll always be perpendicular to that x, so it'll still go sort of at an angle, which is the way that the toe should be bending, right? Because we want it to rotate, you know, this way, not necessarily like forward and back this way, if that makes sense. All right, that leg is looking good. Cool, let's test this. I'm just going to grab these two and rotate them so I can straighten out the knee as it goes forward or bend it that way. And actually, as I look at this, this is doing the opposite of what I want it to do. This would be appropriate for a human, I suppose. But when the hip goes back, if this was rotating the same direction, basically I'm trying to compress the leg. So I would expect the hip to go this way and the knee to go that way, right? Because that's how a bird's leg actually compresses, because the knees are backwards relative to ours. But you'll notice when I select both of them, that knee is rotating the wrong way. So actually what I want to do is flip the orientation of my knee to actually be the opposite direction. So sort of a caveat to what we just talked about. From here, because I've already got it straight, I'm actually going to use that step snap and rotate it around. There. And then I'll turn a step snap off. So now if I grab both of those, that's the kind of animation that I would want to see when that leg goes backwards. Cool. So caveat. All right, so now I'm going to grab that hip and then the lower body joint and parent it, right? Make it a child of the lower body. Cool. And now let's make our other leg really easily by going to skeleton, mirror joints, and I'm going to go to the options. In this case, I want to mirror it across the XY axis, right? Moving basically in Z direction, so I need to select the X and the Y. I'm going to mirror the behavior, and then I'm going to replace L for R, just like that. And then let's just check to make sure that our joints are appropriately placed. Right? Remember, not all characters are symmetrical. In this case, my joints are off, so I definitely want to modify the position of these joints. So I might try to do this with rotations so that I don't have to reorient. If I can. Because it's pretty minor, it might not be that bad. Yeah, that, maybe. Cool. So it's totally up to you. If you want to reorient them, feel free. If you want to try to rotate them and then freeze your transformations, do that. Now what's nice about this one is if I get this lined up the right way, I can just move this along the x-axis, and that's not going to modify the orientation, right? Because this is pointing directly down the x-axis. So I can move this closer or farther and not modify the orientation of the joints. So that's pretty nice. And then I'll rotate this way. Yeah. So those all look like they're in the right position, which is nice. I can grab this and freeze those transformations, and that should work well for me. All right, now if I grab both hips, rotate them out, right, I'm getting that mirrored behavior. When one goes out, the other one goes out, which is nice. If I grab the knees and the hips and rotate them this way, I'm getting that animation that I'd like to see. Cool. All right, legs are good. I'm going to go ahead and save this before moving forward. So when saving this, I'm going to use the same naming conventions that I noticed in this project, right? So if we look back at that geo file, right? So we have chapter 7. We obviously don't need that, but Marv, Bird, Geo, V1. So I'm going to do the same kind of naming convention. So in my scenes folder, I'm going to call it Marv, Bird, Rig in all caps _ V1. Right, so the same sort of naming convention that exists in the rest of the project, and that would be important for wherever you're working. They're going to have specific naming conventions, not only in your outliner but also in your files, and so we're going to maintain that, right? And this helps somebody to understand, like, oh, this Marvbird Geo file, that's connected to the Marvbird Rig file, right? Really easy connection there. Cool. Save as. All right, on to the spine. So this guy's spine is really his neck, right? So we're sort of rigging the spine and the neck together, whereas the neck on a person might be, 1 or 2 joints perhaps. This is like all neck. All right, so back to this view from his side. I'll go back to that create joints and start creating some. So pay attention to the geometry as you're doing this. I'm going to put one right around here. I'm thinking of like where that spine would start, maybe somewhere around there, and then sort of work my way up from there. I'm not going to put one on every edge loop, but try to keep them fairly consistent as we go. There's no specific number that you need, but enough that it's going to work. And again, trying to put them on an edge loop here. So that's pretty good. I'll put one for the base of the head. So this is where actually the head will rotate from, just about here. And then a head tip at the top. I have no idea if this is the same as what she did or not. We'll find out. As we're still here, actually, I'm going to create a jaw joint while we're here. So go back to that create joints. I'll click on the head joint and then place a jaw joint. So where I want that lower jaw to open. It actually should be pretty close to here. And then a jaw tip. And then we're also going to do one for the top beak as well, which obviously physically is inaccurate, but this is a super cartoony character, so we'll do that. So I'll put a jaw top, maybe somewhere here, and a tip for the top. A tip for the top, right there. All right, now it's time to do some renaming. So I'm going to grab all of my spine joints individually. So that's my head joint, but this one and going downwards are spine joints. And so I'm going to open up the renaming tab. If you don't see it, it's probably buried under one of these right here. And then you're going to find rename. And so I'm going to rename this one spine joint. And you'll notice that it automatically names them those values. However, the way in which I selected them made it so that this actually did not work well for me. Right? It'll rename them based on which one you selected and then the order in which you selected them. So the issue I have now is like I have spine joint 1, spine joint 5, and I would rather have them go like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 going upwards. So I'm going to redo that. Let me just undo. So I'm going to go this way. So select there, and then make sure you sort of shift click them as you go up the chain. And then I'll do the same thing. So spine joint. And now you'll notice that I get that really nice hierarchy there. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then keep going up. This will be my head joint, and then head tip joint. I'll call this one jaw low joint and jaw low tip joint. Oops. Something like that. Jaw high joint and jaw high tip joint. Oops, I spelled that one. There we go. So something like that, and feel free to choose your different naming. You could go like top and bottom. I just chose low and high, and sort of kept it short. Right, that's the idea. Is like try to keep your names as short as you can because names can get super long, especially once we get to the fingers. Right, trying to distinguish like left finger, or like on the left arm, but it's this specific finger, but it's that specific joint of that specific finger. Right, and trying to like figure out how can you condense all of those names down really short is going to be really important. All right, so that looks pretty good to me. I'm going to go ahead and parent my spine joint to my upper body joint. Actually, before I do that, I'm going to unparent it real quick, and I'm going to check my orientations. So let's take a look. I didn't move anything, so in theory my orientations should be okay, but clearly they're not. So let's reorient. I'm just going to do, just for the sake of making sure that all my X's are down the chain, I will orient joint, and then I'll play with them. So in this case, now I got a bunch of Z's pointing to the right. I also have a bunch of Z's pointing to the left. So it's purely whichever one you want. It doesn't exactly matter. So I'll go to my top view. I need to move this camera upwards. So let me select that camera and then move it to the top. And that view might not exactly help me. Oops. Might not exactly help me in actually seeing anything, except the orientation could be actually a little bit more visible. And I could turn off polygons, and that may or may not be helpful. If you zoom out, perhaps. All right, so again, it doesn't matter which way they go. So I'll just make them go that way. It looks like they're all lined up pretty well, so I'll use that step snap again. I'll just set this to 90 and rotate on the x-axis. Can't actually see where I'm going. I feel like it's going every direction except the way I want it to go. What if I have 45? There we go. That's looking the right way. All right, going up the neck here to the head. Very nice. Again, I don't care about the tip, but I do want to get the jaws. And making sure that you're rotating only on the x-axis while you do this one. Cool. So everything up here, what's that one? I see the Z sticking out. What are you? That's the head tip. I don't care about that. So all my other Z's, except for the tips, are facing the same direction. And that looks good to me. All right, now I'm going to grab that and parent it to the upper body. It's just a precaution that I do. I don't like reorienting joints when they're connected to something else, I just have this fear that I might mess up the orientation of something that I've done before, and so that's always something that I'm just kind of careful of. Actually, I want to reorient that one too, though, now that I'm looking at my upper body joint. I have that one kind of go so right. I'll leave it. I'll leave it for now. I might change my mind later, but I'll leave that. All right. One thing I do want to test is make sure that spine is working the way I want it to. So I'm going to grab each of the joints individually, and then rotate them. And so that's what I want to see, is that they're all curling backwards at the same time or curling forwards at the same time. Right, which is because the orientations are the same. So that looks pretty good. All right, now we're on to the arms here. So this arm is complicated. Obviously, it's not a human arm, human hand, but ultimately we're going to rig it pretty similarly to what we would do for a human. It's not that much different. We'll treat the feathers like fingers. And the arm will be pretty similar. We'll just sort of have to work with the pose and get that. So I'm going to go to this side view, right? That's where I can really see my arm the best. Create joints, and I'll just start with the shoulder. You can pick either one. It doesn't exactly matter. I'll just work on this side. So I'll create a joint. I like to click and hold and sort of drag it into place as I'm sort of thinking about where it goes. So maybe somewhere around there where the shoulder rotates from. Next, the elbow will be here-ish. From here, we're going to create the wrist twist bone. The reason why we create a wrist twist in between our elbow and our wrist is if you actually notice, if you rotate your wrist, use your own reference, the twist of your lower arm between your elbow and your wrist really happens kind of closer to the middle. Ultimately, because your lower arm isn't actually rotating, right? They're just two bones that are sort of flopping over the top of the other one. And so a lot of that twist sort of appears in the middle between your elbow and your wrist there. So we're going to create that wrist twist joint right around here, and then the wrist joint as well around there. And then I'll hit enter. So let's go ahead and rename while we're here. I might do this. I'll hit that one and hit F, and then I can access all of them. So this is going to be L. Let me make sure she does the same. L wing shoulder joint. So a capital H. L wing elbow joint. L wing wrist twist. Make sure you spell it correctly. Joint. And L wing wrist joint. Cool. Again, I'm using her naming conventions. All right, now let's take a look in our other camera and make sure we actually put this in the right place. So I'll just sort of scoot this forward into where that shoulder should be. Feels pretty good. Check the elbow, maybe scoot you forward. The wrist twist, maybe a little bit forward as well. And the wrist, right in there. Cool. All right. Let me go ahead and freeze transformations, and we are going to orient. Let's see. So I have, looks like two Z's are pointing forward. So I'll keep that. Let's rotate this one. Again, I could use my top view, might be easiest. and rotate along the X until that Z is pointing forward. Somewhere around there. This one could go a little bit straighter. Actually, yeah. And I'll grab that one. This one is currently acting like a tip, right? Because there's nothing else there. So actually it won't really orient well here. So I'll have to create the fingers and then reorient that one as we go. Or I could do it now. Either way, I could sort of manually adjust it. In this case, I will rotate the Y to get that X pointing this way. Basically, I want it pointing down this finger because that's ultimately where my joints will be anyways. So that's why I brought that back. And my Z pointing forward. Cool. Just kind of planning that the X will go down the chain this way. All right, so I'm done orienting the arm there. So I'm going to start on the feathers here. So we're not going to do all the feathers, don't worry. You don't need to do all of them. We're just going to do the 4 top ones. So this one, that one, and maybe the big one here. I don't think we do those 3. Do whatever she does. All right, so thinking about this long finger here, I'm going to put a joint there. There. You don't need to do it for all of the edge loops, but I'm going to plan on this one because I'll have a joint that comes down this way. Maybe jump up to here, and then I'll get more curl at the end. So something like that, perhaps. Though I might put one there. I think I will. You don't need one on every edge loop, but I might, just to get like a really nice curvy finger. So I'll do that. I'll just keep drawing them out. So from here, I'm going to create this one. Yeah, keep it simple. Alright, same idea from this one. I'll do this feather. And then from here, we're going to do this large one. So I'm actually going to make that one come from the wrist. So I'm just going to start it on its own. Something like that, right? So sort of four larger fingers there of a thumbless hand is what she describes. So that way I have these 4 fingers, right? So 2 of them are coming off of that first finger joint there. Though technically I could make this one come off of the wrist if I wanted to, but this seemed more appropriate. And this one I will make sure it comes off of the wrist, not the wrist twist. That's going to be really important. The wrist twist only job is to rotate this way. So the wrist is where we'll actually get that other rotation. Cool. All right, now let's go ahead and place them in. Spend some time making sure that this is actually working. I might actually even turn this off just to help see a little bit. Right, make sure each of your joints is working. And I might try, I'm going to orient this anyway, so I could just scoot them over. So just making sure that each one of these is working for me. Let's see what a rotate will do. Cool. And then the last one. Nice. So that looks pretty good. What I'll do is go ahead and grab all those freezer transformations as well as orient their joints. So this is pretty good actually. Looks like all of my Z's are pointing forward. All of my Y's are pointing up, which is nice. I'm going to keep that. No complaints. Sweet. Now let's go ahead and parent. So I'm going to grab this one and parent it to the wrist. I'm also going to grab this one and parent it to the wrist. All right, so now when I rotate that wrist, we get that really nice wrist rotation there. Right? And what's cool about the fingers is, let's say I grab all of these individually. And rotate them. Whoa, too much. And rotate them too much. What is that? Oops. I just realized I made a huge mistake. Good thing I caught this. I noticed that I had some weird issue here, and I maybe you caught this. I created an orient constraint rather than orienting my joints, which is why all my orientations worked really well. So make sure you don't do what I did. Don't constrain orient. Make sure you're orienting your joints. So catch that. All right, now let me double check those orientations. And this should still be pretty good, actually. But watch out for that. Cool. All right, I'm happy with it. Now let me parent them back again. Just double checking that I don't have those inputs there. All right, get those children, parent them up. And now that should work really well. Okay, and again, testing. That's why you test. Testing is super important. That's how I figured out that I made a huge error. So make sure you're testing as you go. It's really easy to mess up. Now if I rotate, that's what I wanted. You get those curling fingers really nicely. Cool. All right, so that is looking good. Now we have a bunch of renaming to do. So let's grab each of those tip joints, and I like to just expose them there, right? Make sure you rename. So L feather A is going to be this finger. So I'm going to call this finger A, B, C, D. And then I'm going to call the joints 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 as we go down to the end, right? This is just an easy way, again, to keep those short naming conventions and keep some sort of organization that makes sense. So this is the top finger. I'm going to call it A. As we go down the joint chain, it'll be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, whatever it needs. So A1 joint. And I'm going to copy this. Actually, let me fix that. And I'm going to copy that. All right. So the next one down the chain is going to be L feather A2. And then L feather A3. L feather A4. L feather A5. L feather A6. And L feather A tip. All right, so this is a really nice way to do it, right? Label each finger a letter and then each joint a number. You could do the opposite, where each finger is a number and each joint is a letter. Either way would work, but this is a really nice approach. With the toes, it was easy just to sort of do inside, middle, outside, because there's only 3 of them. There are a lot more than 3 up here, and so it's nice to approach it with this kind of naming convention. It keeps it way shorter than it could. Cool. So now onto this one. So this is going to be my L feather B1, right? So then L feather B2 and L feather B tip. All right. So keep going down. So L feather C1. I'll just copy that. L feather C2, L feather C3, and L feather C tip. And then the same thing here. So D1, copy that. D2, oops. Cool, just like that. So that's a really nice way of maintaining a really nice naming structure that doesn't take a huge name in order to actually communicate what you're trying to do. And of course, it would take some time for somebody else to figure it out, but there's no real better way to do it. You know, if we were to do the smaller fingers, you know, you can imagine like E might be this one, or I don't know, E might be this one, you know, or one of those two. So you'd have to kind of figure out, you know, where are you going to go from there. Maybe you do all the middle ones, and then you do the front ones, and then you do the back ones. Either way, however you wanted to approach it would probably be sufficient. But I would continue with this sort of naming convention of giving every feather a letter and then every joint a number as you go. All right, so now that we've got that arm working, what we're missing is a clavicle, right? If you sort of feel your clavicle joint, the one right below your neck, that's the one that actually is lifting your shoulder. If you sort of try to shrug your shoulders, you'll notice that your clavicle is going up. Also, if you lift your arm out to the side, you can raise your arm pretty much even with your shoulder, right? Your wrist even with your shoulder, and your clavicle doesn't move. After that, it's all your clavicle that's doing the rotation there. And so we need that clavicle in order to get really nice shoulder shrugs, as well as to get really nice shoulder rotation once the arms go higher. It's a little bit less important here, obviously, because his shoulders are different, but in a human rig, it'd be super important that we have that clavicle to help support the shoulder rotation. So we're going to create those on Marv as well. So it's a little bit tough to figure out where Marv's clavicle is going to be. I'm going to put it, you know, somewhere right in here, similar to where you would expect it on a person. You could study avian anatomy, I suppose, but I'm going to put it somewhere right around here, and then scoot it forward around there. Seems pretty good. All right, that's kind of where I would expect the clavicle to be. Cool. All right, freeze transformations. I'll go ahead and rename it. So L clavicle, clavicle joint. Very nice. All right, so I'll grab that shoulder, make it a child of the clavicle. Now I definitely want to make sure that clavicle orientation is appropriate. What I don't want to do here is skeleton orient joint, because it's going to do the entire joint chain. Everything that I've just fixed up here, which I've made really nice, it'll just like reset all of it to however it wants to. So Don't just do that. What I'm going to do is manually rotate this so that that X is pointing down the chain. So something like this. I'll do it in a couple different perspective views, or orthographic views, sorry. So that looks good, sort of pointing right there, right? And then I'll check it in this view here. Get rid of that. Yeah, rotate this way. As long as it's pretty close, you should get there. You can also use this. So you can use the plus and minus to increase the size of your widget. And so at this point, like that Y rotational axis is really pointing where that X is going. So I could increase this, and also you can zoom in and out, and that actually should get pretty close. So I can kind of use that as a guide to where is that thing actually pointing, which is kind of nice. Or do this and then say like, okay, maybe that wants to be there, right? And really get that very close to lining up using that widget as a guide. So that's really cool way to do that. All right, so that X is pointing down the chain where I would like it to go. I'm happy with that. All right, so now I need to parent this clavicle joint to the body. So what I don't want to do is put it on my spine, right? Because this is going to rotate my neck. So the best place for me to put it is actually just back to the upper body there. If I had another joint in here, which I considered doing as sort of a start to that spine, I probably would have parented it here. But this one, to me, is like the start of that neck, and I don't want that clavicle to rotate with that one. So that's why I chose the upper body. Your skeleton might be a little bit structurally different, which is fine. But this one makes sense to me. All right, now that our arm is working, let's mirror it over. So skeleton, mirror joints options. So again, I'm going to do across the X, Y. I like behavior. In this case, we're doing L and R. So all the same things for me, and we'll mirror it across. I just realized that my legs are named backwards. You might have noticed that. Because I was doing the right leg, she was doing the left leg. All of my names are backwards for both legs, which is problematic. The issue here, just strictly for renaming purposes, is I can't just call this one R hip joint, because I already have an R hip joint. It'll give me that number, which doesn't help me. So let me group that, and then I should be able to. Yeah, so now that those two are not in the same hierarchy, right, because they were both children of the lower body, I couldn't have two of the same name. Now I could change that name. So I'm going to grab the L knee joint and then select hierarchy. So everything from that L knee all the way down in my case. And then I'm going to modify, search and replace names. I'm going to search for L underscore and replace it with R underscore in what is selected here. So that looks good. And then I'm going to grab this R hip joint. I'll just select the hierarchy of that, modify, search and replace names, and I'm going to do the opposite. So search for R underscore, replace with L underscore. Cool. And then I can reparent this back to the lower body. Whoa. Oh, everything is selected right now. So that's what when I'm parenting it, it's everything is being parented. So I'll just reparent that, and I can delete that group, and everything should be good. This is probably something that I'd want to test to make sure that everything is good. Make sure that. So that's still rotating the way I want to. Just sort of looking at the toe rotations, orientations, and that looks good to me. So yeah, be careful with that. Be careful with your naming. Remember, when we're naming, it's relative to the character, not to the way in which we're viewing the character, because that can always change. But this is the character's right side. This is the character's left side. Right? This is the character's left and the character's right. And those will always be the character's left and right, as opposed to our perspective could change. So, yeah, watch out for that. All right, now let me check my arm just to make sure that these are in the right spot. I noticed the feet were not in the exact same spot, so the arm might not be, in which case actually it's not, right? It's a little bit off. So you always want to check that when you mirror whether or not these are actually in there. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time putting these in the right place. And I'm going to try to do it just simply with rotation, if I can. So that's pretty good with some rotating. So I'm going to grab from here and freeze my transformations to get rid of all the rotational values. And I don't need to reorient. This one's a little bit off, which is a little bit troubling, but I don't think it's that far off. So I'm going to keep it. And just because that bothers me. Rotate that and freeze its transformations. All right, so that's pretty good to get that other arm in there. Cool. So that is our skeleton throughout Chapter 7. There are other joints that she will create that we're not going to create. For example, she'll create ultimately a tail joint or a series of joints that go through each of the tail. I think there will also be a series of joints in the feather here on the top so that this could be animated, which would be really cool. And the other fingers will get joints as well, which we don't need to do. But go ahead and double check that all of your joints are working the way you think they're supposed to be working. Make sure the orientations are pointing the right direction, right, the way that you think they're supposed to be working. Make sure that your names are all correct. Make sure that there are no rotational values in any of your joints. Before we move forward, you want to make sure that all of this stuff is the way you think it's supposed to be, right? Don't go too far ahead and leave something to mess you up later on. So constantly be testing, constantly be checking for any errors. I made 2 drastic errors in this one video alone. So make sure you're always checking to make sure that it is all working the way you think it's supposed to be. All right, I'll see you in the next one.